The indie game landscape has become a fertile ground to revive nostalgia and pay homage to those genres and types of games that we grew up loving in earlier decades. This has been especially true in the horror genre. There has been a boom of PS1 and retro-style visual aesthetics with gameplay mechanics and stories that pay homage to horror games that came out in the 90s. But what about the 2000s? What about the distinct feel of the PS2 era horror games? Well, today, I am going to be talking about a game that looks to revive the nostalgia of classic 2000s survival horror games through its aesthetics, gameplay, and feel. And may I add that they did a mighty fine job. Hi everyone, my name is Jeremy and this is my non-spoiler review for the indie horror game Observo for PC. The game is available on Steam and itch.io and was developed and published by Space Zeta Games. Observo follows the story of Edgar, a man on a business trip that has to find a place where to sleep at the last minute. He finds a small inn in town and decides to stay there despite its deteriorated look. However, as the night progresses, weird things start to happen, and Edgar ends up having to face horrors that he had never seen before. Now he must find a way to escape that haunted place with his life. Just like classic survival horror games, the story of Observo is told through documents that you find throughout the game, cutscenes with some weird and eerie characters, and small narrations of the main character that give you insight into how he feels and perceives the situation he's going through. Pay close attention to every detail because Observo's story is an ambiguous one that is up for interpretation. Through the information that you find in the documents, you will have to piece together the story and arrive at your own conclusions as to what is happening. In what regards to the visuals and graphics of the game, Observo seeks to emulate survival horror games from the 2000s, and this shows in the visual style of the game. I would describe this game as having almost like a PS2 era look to it, with a touch of a modern feel. The visuals are very good and work well with the eerie and creepy feeling the game is going for. Additionally, in the settings of the game, you will find a lot of options to play around with. The game features grain and pixelation filters and color posterization to give a look closer to the 2000 era. You can change the texture, shadow, and foliage quality. You can play in 30 FPS, 60 FPS, and you can change the resolution, among many other things. The game's PC requirements are as follow. I played the game at 60 FPS at 1080p with all max settings and it ran consistently without flaws. In the music and sound department, the game includes some atmospheric tracks that create some scary ambience, and in some instances it transmits a lot of tension. Sound design wise, the game does what so many other horror games do, but they manage to implement it in a way that works. You will be scared, hearing weird noises all around you. The sound design is also integrated into the gameplay. Many enemies are off screen and you will know that they are there if you pay close attention to the noises they make. So let's talk about the gameplay. Observo is a survival horror indie game. Its mechanics are centered around resource management, inventory management, puzzle solving, and some light fighting, all combined with a modern control scheme, which you can change in the settings, and fixed camera angles for a classic and cinematic look. The fighting in this game is mostly melee focused. You will have 3 tools to fight enemies throughout the game: a pipe, bear traps, and steel poles, which is the only ranged weapon. The game features only 2 enemy types, and there's only 1 boss fight at the end of the game. Puzzles are challenging but not overly complicated or obtuse, and the level design is very good. The inn setting is a very interesting choice and works in the game's favor. The place is medium sized with a mix of open areas and closed areas. It's easy to explore and hard to get lost because of its size, which really helps the pacing of the game. Observo is a short horror game lasting around 4 to 5 hours depending on how fast you play. So let's talk about the cons and the pros of this game. There is no one specific thing that I would point out as a con for this game. This time around, my complaint is more so with small design choices that add up and generate a certain amount of tediousness that permeated my gameplay experience. Some of these small choices were as follows. For example, you don't have a map. The map is placed in specific places in the inn, and you have to go there if you want to look at the map and plan what you want to do next. The map is not very functional because it does not mark where you have been and where you haven't been, and it doesn't tell you anything besides the layout of the place. Once enemies appear in the game, a very big amount of them appear. You have to kill them little by little in melee combat, and for that you need to get the timing right, hitting the enemies and pulling away just as they are going to grab you, which is part of the charm of the fighting in this game. This is fun to practice with the first few enemies though. But when you notice there is a huge amount of enemies throughout the map, it becomes tedious. Sometimes enemies are in groups, and because of how limited the fighting is, you have to find ways to separate them, adding to the tediousness. Later in the game, smaller enemies appear that can attack very fast and require a very specific approach to deal with, and if you are not careful, they can really ship your life away very fast. And for that same reason, you're gonna have to be saving the game constantly, because if you committed too many mistakes and you didn't keep multiple save files, you're gonna have to go back to the drawing board because the resources are very limited. I am aware that some of the things that I mentioned come as part of the package of any survival horror game, but I feel like minor changes could have reduced the tediousness and made the experience more enjoyable. The main strength that I would point out for this game would have to be the atmosphere and the feel of it. Observo truly feels like a horror game from the 2000s with its music, sound design, setting, visuals, and gameplay, and it gives it a lot of charm. Putting aside the tediousness of which I spoke of, the game is very fun to play through. So in conclusion, Observo distinguishes itself from other survival horror indie games by going for the feel of a 2000 era survival horror game. This game reminds us horror fans why survival horror from that age was so wonderful. Despite small design choices that add tediousness to the overall experience, Observo still manages to outweigh its flaws with its music, sound design, visuals, and gameplay, writing a beautiful homage to survival horror games of the 2000s. Observo is pure comfort food for survival horror fans. For this reason, I recommend Observo. The game's link is in the description, as always, and the game is available on Steam and itch.io, so go show the developer some love. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with our content.